and welcome to the Willard Preacher podcast. This is episode 4. At some point, I'm sure we'll just say this is the Willard Preacher podcast, and we won't need to put a number on it, but we're pretty new at this, so here we are. Once again, I'm Matt, former Penn State student, and with me, as always, is Gary Cattell, who is known as the Willard Preacher, who has been evangelizing, preaching to the students of Penn State for over 40 years now. And so this podcast is basically an extended conversation with Gary, talking to him about his ministry, about how he thinks about things and how he presents things, and how we might defend our faith and how we might think about seeking and knowing God. So how are you, Gary?
Doing well, thank you.
Awesome.
We had a little bit of interesting interaction on, what was it, Friday? I thought we could maybe start out with, if that's all right.
That sounds great.
So I was out there doing my usual thing, preaching, and some guy came up to me and said, are you preaching about trans? And I said, well, yeah, it's in the mix. You know, it's one of the things I go through. Mm-hmm. And he said, did you know that this was Trans Day of Visibility? Which, of course, I didn't know. I didn't heard anything about it. He said, could you give it a break just for this day? Just for this day, don't say anything. Don't be transphobic for this day. You know, they always have to get the name calling in. I don't know if they think I'm going to go home and cry or something, but they always have to say, you know, something like that. So I said something like, I forget what I said, but basically I declined. And so he went off into class and he came out. And of course, now that I know it's Trans Day of Visibility, that's what I've got to preach on the whole day. So he didn't really do himself any favors there. So he came out and he said, I guess you're not taking, you know, my advice or not doing what I asked, are you? I said, nope. And he said, well, do you think a righteous God would like that? And then he walked away. I didn't have time to say, yeah, I think a righteous God would like that. But it's the same sort of thing all the time. They try to find some way to silence you. So take this day off because it's a Trans Day of Visibility. So the entire university is structured to say trans is good. You know, professors, if they say anything about it, say it's good. Nobody is publicly saying anything against it. If anybody's against it, they're keeping quiet. So you got this one guy in the free speech ghetto standing out in front of Willard. You know, I always say, if you can't get on TV, you can't get on radio, just stand somewhere and talk. It's the free speech ghetto. So one guy in the free speech ghetto is there speaking, and you try to silence him. You can't stand one voice, one public voice against what you believe. And homosexuals used to do this too. They used to say, the homosexuals, their supporters, they used to come out and say, well, if somebody hears what you're saying, and I'd be out there saying homosexuality was wrong, explaining why, you know, not doing anything else, just explaining why I thought it was wrong. So if somebody takes what you're saying and beats up homosexuals or kills a homosexual or homosexual commits suicide, then it's your fault for saying homosexuality is wrong and saying what you're saying. So if that's true, again, the only moral and right thing to do is to not say anything against homosexuality. So it's always about silencing the opposition, the transphobe, the homophobe, the racist. And again, the label doesn't have to fit. You can be saying anything, they call you racist if that's what it takes to silence you. So if they really, really, not just believe, but they really thought they could defend their belief, they wouldn't have to do that. You did a little preaching out in front of Willard that one summer, and I've done it, and others have done it, and we welcome people to come. We welcome debate. We welcome interaction because we think we have the truth. And if we have the truth and somebody comes up and opposes us, if, you know, hopefully we do it reasonably well, we think the truth ultimately went out. But when you're constantly trying to silence your opposition, even if it's just for a day, or if we're the homosexuals, it was basically for the whole time, then it's obvious that you don't think you can defend your position. And so that's what I took from that. So I don't know if we want to get into the trans thing here. I guess we will.
Sure.
So here's the thing about the transgendered. In normal life, everyday life, if physical reality conflicts with thoughts and feelings, physical reality is always right, because physical reality can't be wrong. thoughts and feelings can be wrong. So in the rest of life, except for in the trans and I think in homosexuality too, but not since we're doing trans, except for in the trans thing, they basically say thoughts and feelings are right and physical reality is wrong. We all know thoughts and feelings can be wrong because we've all had thoughts that were wrong. We've all thought they were so logical, so rational. You know, we had all our ducks in a row, A, B, C, D conclusion. And then we learn something, some new information comes, somebody points something out, and we realize we were wrong. We felt something so deeply, it had to be right. I remember back in the 60s and 70s, I heard the hippies back, I was still young, but I heard the hippies back then saying, how can something that feels so good be so wrong? So they're saying, if it feels good, do it. That was the whole thing. But we all know that you can feel something so deeply. And if you ever have kids and they get into adolescence, they get like that sometimes, you know. To them, it feels so deeply that it has to be right. And they don't quite know yet that feelings can be wrong. It doesn't matter how deeply you feel them, they can be wrong. So anytime those two things conflict, thoughts and feelings have to be wrong. When the trans thing, you've got let's say for me, let's say I have a male body. That's physical reality. My sex is, you know, male, and that's physical reality. Chromosomes, XY chromosome, body type, muscle mass, testosterone level, whatever. It all says this is male. If my thoughts and feelings tell me I'm female, in real life, I would say, oh, my thoughts and feelings are wrong because the physical reality of my body is male. But in this case, in this one case, and again in homosexuality too, if we can see at some point, they say, no, your thoughts and feelings are right. The physical reality of your body is wrong. There's no reason for that. They can't give a good reason for that. The only reason for that is the secular elites say so. Secular elite, those in the dominant media, dominant educational establishment, they say, in this case, thoughts and feelings are right. But why? There is no reason why. So it's just the way they say it is, and everybody then bows the knee to it. So that brings up problems. If I can't trust physical reality, so in other words, if the guy's not really a guy and the girl's not really a girl, then is the computer really a computer? Are the shelves really a shelf? How do you know now what reality is? Who says what reality is? If I can look at a guy and I'm supposed to believe they're a girl, number one, that's a mental illness. If I'm looking at a guy and I think it's a girl, I have mental problems. And if I'm a guy and I think I'm a girl, I have mental problems. It's a mental illness. And we're not, a little bit of a side here, we're not helping them. Some people say, oh, I'm trying to be nice. If it's a guy and he thinks he's a girl, I'll call him a she, or I'll call him, you know, by a female name, Mary or something. You're not helping them. You're helping their mental illness continue. Because their mental illness is their thoughts and feelings are not connecting with physical reality. And somebody once said to me, a friend of mine said to me, it's kind of like somebody who's anorexic, who thinks they're fat, and they're really skin and bones, and you want to be nice, so you say, yes, you're fat. You're not helping them. You're hurting them. You're furthering their mental illness. And that's what we're doing here. And if I'm supposed to see a guy and I'm supposed to see that that's not a guy, that's really a girl, they're fostering that mental illness on me, because now I'm not supposed to see reality either. So we're fostering all these mental illnesses in people, not just with homosexuality, not just with transgender, but with homosexuality and abortion and other things, because we're saying what you're seeing isn't really reality. Mm-hmm. Something else is reality. And now, it's number one, that's mental illness, because my inner thoughts and feelings are not connecting right with outer reality. But now, who am I supposed to go to know what's real? How am I supposed to know this computer's not a starship? Who's supposed to tell me? Mm-hmm. If it gets down to a fundamental level, well, I can't tell that a guy is a guy and a girl is a girl. Well, what can I tell? Well, the person who comes in and tells me, of course, is the secular elite. So now, whether they meant it this way or not, they basically are getting total control, because the younger generations pretty much now have to wait to be told what reality is. Mm-hmm. They can't come out and say it. And even if they disagree with what the secular elite are saying, they can't come out and say it, because, you know, then they'll get called the bad names, and who wants to be called the bad names? Mm-hmm. So it's not only the mental illness of the trans person, they're foisting that mental illness on everybody else. So whether it's any one of these slew of things, they're causing us to doubt reality or to say reality is not reality. And that's, to me, that's textbook mental illness. You know, you're not seeing reality for what it is.
Absolutely. So is that how you try to walk through that issue out at Willard?
I usually do the physical reality and thoughts and feelings.
Yeah.
And I did, and I was talking to a girl on Friday about it. She was saying, well, that's their inner identity. Okay, that's just another way of saying thoughts and feelings. That's the problem. Your inner identity, unless they want to say that they're two people, they're both male and female. The male body, the female thoughts and feelings. You know, your inner thoughts and feelings, whether you call it identity or whatever, has to match outward reality. That's always what the truth is. And with us, it's God who tells us what reality is. Right? So we know that what reality is because God says he is truth, he is God, he is omniscient, and so on. He says this is reality, and we try to conform ourselves to that. But at the same time, but if you don't have that, you have to ground yourself to something else. And the next best thing to having God tell you is having physical reality tell you. So when we thought the sun went around the earth, okay, and this is what science is all about, right? So we thought the sun went around the earth. We realized by doing whatever we did that the earth goes around the sun. If you have somebody still today saying, no, the sun goes around the earth, we think, no, they got some sort of problem there. They're not dealing well with reality. And that's what science is all about. People always extol science. And in the sense of discerning how things are working in the material world, it does a good job. So if they say, if they have convincing evidence that something that we thought was one way, and they're saying, no, it's another way, and they have convincing evidence of it, we're not supposed to deny that and go with our thoughts and feelings. We're supposed to change our thoughts and feelings, except when it comes to trans and a couple of other things. Then no, we're supposed to say physical reality is wrong. Our thoughts and feelings are right. We turn everything upside down.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is. I think that analogy that someone had suggested, you said about anorexia, is a great one, because that's something we can clearly look at. You know, physical reality, as you say, is physical reality is that this person is quite thin. They think that they are not. They think that they're overweight, and so they are heading down a path that is, even physically, less and less and less healthy. You know, so in this case, like you said, it is ultimately about being told what reality is. And so the compassionate thing, isn't to just let them persist in that delusion, really. My experience with it, you know, as I mentioned in another episode, I was a school teacher for several years, and with that, there really, when I first started, there were no kids that were identifying as trans. And then, you know, around 2001, 2002, 3, 4, then I was away from it. When I came back, that's when that sort of emerged. And then as I think I taught for eight more years, but as I was teaching, it was becoming more and more prevalent. So it was clearly something that it was one of these things that's in the air. You know, I heard a psychologist talk recently, and he was sort of talking about how some of these things that we think are just some of the things that we regard as mental illnesses actually have sort of like periods when they peak and when they fall off, based on whether that is something that is in the air, that is popularly known. So a certain thing, bulimia and anorexia at certain times, you see more and you see less. Multiple personality disorder sort of emerged out of nowhere and then disappeared, and a variety of other things. And in my view, this is one of these things that you know, it's one of these things that seems to emerge out of nowhere. Um, I would. It seems also that what's really kind of sinister and very sad about this is that it seems like, especially amongst young people. So I was teaching high school, so we're talking, I don't know, 14, 15, 16-year olds, that it was really kind of very vulnerable people that were kind of emerging and saying, well, I think this is who I am, or this is my identity. In other words, maybe particularly impressionable young people. Maybe they didn't feel settled in life, and what adolescent really feels all that settled. And so then there's this suggestion, and um, you know, then that becomes a path that they move down. And it didn't seem like it really was something that was for the kids that I knew who identified in this way. It didn't seem like it was particularly bringing them a whole lot of peace. It would seem like sort of another part of their confusion. And yeah, it really was just a sad thing, rather than something that is, that's somehow solves the puzzle, right? So, and of course, the way that it's put out there is that really the compassionate thing is to affirm this and to say, yes, this is who you are. Really just affirming unhappiness and confusion and illness ultimately.
I think what's happened, I heard an interview from some girl who got into this, and I don't know what she did to her body or whatever, but then she regrets it now. She said, yeah, she was confused and lonely and whatever it was, and this community accepted her.
Mm-hmm.
Now she found acceptance, and everybody thought she was somebody. So yeah, there's no particular reason why these things should spike like that,
Mm-hmm.
other than it does become a way to belong to something,
Right.
in a way to get some sort of feedback that you're a good person, you're a wanted person.
Right.
And they get into these communities, and all of a sudden they're wanted. But it's not just those who are trans that's the problem. It's we who buy into it.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you think, for instance, that guys can give birth, now again, you got mental problems. You're not dealing with reality. Or guys can menstruate. They're giving us mental problems here, mental illnesses, because we're supposed to affirm that which is absolutely foolish and idiotic. But we're supposed to affirm it, and people do.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not dealing with reality. Or if you think a guy playing on a girls' sports team is okay because he's not really a guy, you've got a mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
You're not dealing with reality. So it's spread from those who actually, the guys who actually think they're girls and girls who actually think they're guys. Everybody else is affirming this because you're not affirming reality.
Mm-hmm.
You're in some sort of secular fantasy la world somewhere, and they're spreading this sort of mental, I don't know what a good word other than mental illness would be, not dealing with reality. They're spreading it to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And the more you do that, and no wonder that they say that this generation that's in college now and around that age group has more mental illnesses than most did. Well, what do you expect? Mm-hmm. You're telling all these things that go counterintuitive to reality. The guy's the girl, the girl's the guy. It's normal for guys to have sex with guys and girls with girls. Women don't get pregnant with human beings, so abortion's okay. Sex is for pleasure, whatever it is. It goes against the reality of what's there. And when your mind has to accept that which isn't real enough times, something happens. The mind can't deal with that. Now, some of them kind of opt out and they just say, well, I don't care, whatever. That's a self-defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Because you can't just always affirm that which is not real and maintain your sanity in some way. Mm-hmm. And there's no way now for that generation, if they don't know who God is, to know what's real and what isn't real. There's no way. They wait to be told. And it's no wonder that they're like the way they are, because their intuition or their observation of life tells them one thing. Everybody that they respect and authority tells them the opposite. And now, their mind is blown. What do we do? Where do we go? How do I think? Well, I'm just going to have to wait to be told. or I'm just going to opt out and say, whatever, you guys do what you want. I'm out of this. I'm just going to do my own thing, whatever.
Right.
And we're just messing up an entire generations of kids. And that's not to mention the kids that are coming into elementary school now and being told, well, you're not necessarily the sex you're born with, and telling them to make the decision and not telling the parents. Like we said last time, I think kids are very suggestible. You suggest things to them, and you're the adult, you're the god, you're the goddess. They're going to tend to believe you. And so we're gonna have whole generations here that don't know how to live life until somebody tells them, because they're not going to be able to trust what they see, and that's going to be a problem. They're going to now be able to be led anywhere, because even if where they're being led by the culture seems absurd, what's more absurd than the guy's the girl and the girl's the guy? So if you can't trust your eyes to know who the guy is and who the girl is, then what can you trust your eyes? What can you trust your senses? What can you trust your mind? What can you trust your intuition? You can't trust it at all. So even if they go down some really evil road, a lot of these people are just going to follow because they're going to say, what do I know? I don't know anything. I don't even know who the guy and the girl is. Maybe this isn't really evil. Maybe I just think it is.
Right.
So it's really a dangerous situation. And it's a culture that's going insane, quickly going insane.
Yeah. And
insane, and not in the sense of just not knowing reality. And we wonder why people just kind of freak out at times, and just kind of break at times. That's always happened, at different times in history. But if they were centered in God and they knew reality, it would be a lot easier for them. But out there in this la-la land where they have no idea what reality is. And that's the trouble with, and that's the problem that parents have today. They're sending these kids to the public schools and they don't know what they're learning. These kids are learning all sorts of stuff that doesn't comport with reality. It's messing up their mind. And what are they going to be like as adults? At the very least, they're going to be sheep, at the very least.
Yeah, that's right. Even the, like you said, some people are just going to check out, and that's, they'll say, whatever you want to do, who am I to say, leave me out of it, basically. And they know well enough that if they speak up, that's not going to go well for them. And so since they've already been sort of disconnected from any sense of reality, then stepping away seems like probably the safest path. It's certainly not one where they're going to either personally or openly with others discuss and see, try to get to the bottom of things, or make sense of things. It's just, well, we've been told this. It doesn't make sense to me, but who am I? And then just, they'll just step out of the way of that rushing cultural river,
Yeah, and so you don't have anybody except for maybe a few Christians here or there that are willing to stand up, or a few maybe conservative commentators. But the conservative commentators, when it comes to like the transgender stuff, they don't care, if you're an adult and do it, just if you're a kid and do it.
Yeah.
Or if homosexuality, they don't care. They don't care about a lot of these things really, because they're looking for votes too. They just care if you're a kid and you're messing up a kid. But if you're an adult, they say whatever you want to do as an adult. But it's just as mentally damaging for an adult as it is for a kid. And then we as Christians, oftentimes, we don't want to speak up because we don't want to lose our job. We want to be able to get a job if you're a student. We want to keep a job if we have one. We want to get the grade if we're a student. So we just kind of keep silent. And I've been thinking, the difference between really martyrs of any time in Christianity, but especially I really like the earlier martyrs because they were so bold and they were so happy to be martyred, so happy to be tortured. They weren't like, oh no, I can't say anything because they might bring me in and they might, they weren't concerned about being called bad names. They were going to be tortured and killed. But they were happy about it because they were suffering for Christ. They were suffering for the God-man Jesus, and that was a great honor. And I think of some of these examples. I like one of them I like is Saint Sylvester. No, Sebastian, Saint Sebastian, I think it is. Anyhow, they did whatever they would do to him. They always tortured them first. They always say, hey, if you worship the gods, then you won't be tortured, and maybe we'll give you lots of good stuff, and maybe we'll give you a place in the government, and you'll be well taken care of. They would say, no, I'd rather keep my faith and go to heaven than worship the gods and go to hell. And so with Saint Sebastian, they shot him through with all these arrows. And so he had all these arrows in him, and they left him for dead. And this Christian lady came by, and she was going to bury him. She realized he was still just barely alive. So through whatever method she had and God's grace and so on, he recovered. Now, today we would say, don't go back there. You better leave. He goes back to the authorities and say, well, here I am. What are you going to do? Screw up the first time. Want to try again? And so they beat him with clubs and killed him. That's that sort of boldness. And we're afraid to be called bad names. And he was basically dead with these arrows. He comes back they bring him back to life, and he just shows back up again and says, well, missed me. Didn't do it. Try again. Saint Sophia, with her daughters, Faith, Hope, and Love, were like 12, 10, and 9 years old. And the authorities bring them in, and they're torturing these kids one at a time with their mother there. And again, we don't like to be called bad names, but she's seeing her daughters tortured, and she's cheering them on. She's saying, hang in there, get your reward, die a martyr, be strong. I just can't imagine that too many mothers doing that today. And you do have some saints that were being tortured and so on, where the family would come and say, just deny, you don't have to deny Christ in your heart, just deny him with your words or whatever. And of course, they always said, no, I'm not going to do that. But here's one who said he was cheering her daughters on to be martyred. And we're afraid to be called bad names. And then there's St. Ignatius. He's the third one I was thinking of this week, that he is a bishop. He's old, maybe 90 years old or whatever. And they're going to throw him to the lions, and they're taking him from whatever he was, and they're taking him to Rome. And he's writing letters to the different churches. And if you want to read early Christian writings, this is one of the earliest ones, first century, early second. He died in 108. And so they were going to throw him to the lions in Rome. And the Christians in Rome were making noises like, hey, man, we got some connections. Maybe we can save you. He was writing to them saying, no, what are you doing? I don't want to be saved. I want to die for Christ. I want to die for my faith. I don't want you to save me. I don't want you to get me out of this. So I think about this, and I think about the huge difference between we, myself included, I'm not immune to this, who don't like to be called bad names, or don't like to lose a job, or don't like to get a bad grade or anything. And here these people are rejoicing being tortured and imprisoned and killed because they have the great honor of suffering for Christ. Now, I realize when I say that, people have to use discernment, and you don't have to fight every battle, and not everyone has to go out and lose their job or anything. But there's just a big difference between how they saw things and how we see things. And if I have to have a hero, I'm going with them.
Absolutely. Yep.
I'm not going with the, hey, I want to get a grade, so I have to be quiet in class. I think I may have told this before, but the two young Protestant students that I talked to late last semester separately, and they were both very zealous. But by the end of the thing, they said, but I won't say any of this in class because I need the grade. And then, say anything to them, they can do what they want. But and then I think of these martyrs, and those were just three of them who ran to be martyred, who thought a great honor to be tortured. And they would mock their torturers sometimes. Right? One guy was having one strip of skin pulled off like every day. And I think it was the emperor that came to him, and he took one of those pieces of skin, ripped it the rest of the way off, and threw it at the emperor and said, here, you like meat? Here it is. These people, those are the people that I think we should try to emulate. I'm not telling anybody what to do. So I'm not saying, I know you have to use discernment and everything, but for me, those are the ones that I want to emulate. And I don't want to stand before God in the end with all these great martyrs around and saying, I did what I did because I didn't want to be called a bad name.
Yeah. And
I understand the difference. I don't have anything to lose. I understand that, I've been called these names forever, and that's different. But really, and I understand people have families to feed and everything. That's why I'm not telling anybody what to do, but just think about the difference between then and now, and, use some wisdom and I always take heart when I see somebody standing up and fighting against this, because the culture is insane. It's an anti-Christian culture. You're not going to, what do I want to say? You're not going to, they're not going to accept you. They're going to call you the bad names, whatever, because that's anti-Christian and you're Christian. So there's no sense trying to be accepted by them, because it's just going to be temporary. As long as you do what they say and say what they say to say and do what they say to do, they'll accept you. But as soon as you try to be Christian, they're not. So what's the point? What's the point of that? I don't see the point.
Yeah. Yeah. And the challenging thing, of course, is that the young people, let's say before they even have a chance to become a Christian, they're told over and over again, this is how you can be a good person, to be a loving person, right? Like you talked about this last time, someone asking you, why do you hate trans people? That's a powerful rhetorical weapon to a young, immature mind. What you're talking about with the martyrs is really why we focus on them. We commemorate martyrs every single day of the church year, and we know their stories and we sing hymns to them. And, the image of the altar is, it sits on top of the bones of the martyrs, right?
Right. Yeah, the bones of the martyrs sewn right into the altar cloth.
That's right. Yeah, every single Orthodox altar has relics of a martyr for a reason,
right.
So that we would have that sort of, is it because we have some sort of morbid fascination? No, it's because there's something beyond this world that is so precious that we should strive for it and not be afraid to, go up against this world.
Yeah, I mean, if we really believe that we're going to heaven, hopefully, ideally, we shouldn't care. But can you see this? Is that seeable?
Yes.
Prologue of Orchid. This is a really good book. If you want to, there are others. There's a Synaxarium I have somewhere. But it has more in-depth stuff. But this is really good because it gives you a short synopsis of the saints of the day, a few of them. It has a little reflection in it. It's written by a saint, I think, and Saint Nikolai.
Yep.
And it has a little reflection and a little homily. And you get the gist of every day when you go through this, you get the gist of what the saints were like and what the martyrs are like. Some of the ones I left out, the church did eventually say, wait till they come for you. Because people would say, hey, I'm here, martyr me, and then they would deny Christ, and that would be worse. But that being said, there's a number of them when you read their stories here, back when the Muslims took over Asia Minor or Greece or whatever it was, maybe both, and there would be somebody, a Christian, and certain things would happen, and he would deny his faith and convert to Islam. And then he'd wake up and he'd say, oh, what did I do? This is not good. So he managed to get away from wherever he was. Usually they'd go to Mount Athos, put themselves under a spiritual father. And after a while, they'd go to their spiritual father and say, look, I have to redeem myself here. And I want to redeem myself through martyrdom. I mean, I denied Christ, I apostatized. I need to redeem that. And most of the times, all the times that are in the book, obviously, they eventually let them go, not always right at once, because they didn't always think they were ready. So then they would go back to wherever they were and stand in the middle of the square and start insulting Muhammad. That's not going to go well for you. So eventually, sometimes they looked at him like, you're crazy. What are you doing? And they didn't think they were really serious. They thought they were crazy. Once they found out they were serious, then they get tortured and they get martyred. And that's how, in their minds, that's how they made up for their apostasy. But again, that's a whole different spirit. That's a whole different way of thinking than we have today.
Well, we as Christians probably find many subtle ways to deny Christ all the time. Every little compromise and things of that nature. That's why, again, we need to see how the martyrs did it.
Yeah, once you have the example of saying, if you're a father and you have kids, or a mother and you have kids, it's very important to read them the lives of the saints, so that they, as they're growing up, have their heroes as the saints and the martyrs and so on. Because even if they weren't martyred, they were great. Maybe they were great ascetics, or maybe they only ate when they took communion, or some of these unbelievable things that you can look to and say, yes, they're my heroes, not the football players, not the sports people, not, I don't know if anybody has a politician that's a hero, but if they do, politician that's a hero, whoever, it's these saints, and that gives them at an early age, that gets into them, and they realize this is what this is about. I had another guy, I was talking to this guy, he was friend. He believed that God existed. He didn't know who the God was, but he was, he's friendly. I've talked to him before. And in the course of what he was saying, he said something like, "Oh, and religion is good for morals." And then he goes on. And I can't emphasize enough that that's not what religion is for. Yeah, that's kind of a starting point. You want to have the right morals. You want to be a good person. But if that's all it is, because I remember back when I was Protestant, and atheists could come up and say, "Well, I'm a good person. I have just as good of morals as any Christian does. Why can't I go to heaven?" And there's the whole relationship thing. You don't have the relationship and everything. But I can't emphasize enough. And we had I was reading something in the other day about patience. We should be patient as Christians. Yes, we should. But anybody can be patient. We're supposed to ascend to being godlike, right? Godlike patience, godlike goodness, godlike mercy. It's not enough just to be a good person and have some self-control like any fallen human can. Jesus didn't come to give that to us. He came to overcome death and sin and give us godlikeness. That's what we have to strive for. If you're only striving to be a good person, okay, well, why do you have to be a Christian then?
Right.
Well, I want to go to heaven. Okay. So now you're going to go to heaven. Now you be a good person. Now what do you do? It's like a friend of mine who in their church, once they become Christian, then it's all about evangelism. Which, I wish more would evangelize, but if that's all you have, you don't have much. That's not what Jesus came to do. That's not the message. Christ in you, the hope of glory, obtaining the divine nature. That's what it's about. So it's so much higher than maybe we have put it out there over the years.
Yeah, and that and unfortunately, that then becomes the argument from the other side, which is, like you said, someone could say, "Yeah, this trans person is a way better person than I am. Who am I to say?" Right? Or this homosexual person is a way kinder, more loving person. That may be true, actually. Nevertheless, the point that the like you said, the goal of the Christian life is total transformation and union with the Holy Trinity. Right. It's not that we sort of get our morals in order per se. Some of the greatest saints, they get to the end of their life and they're like, I haven't even begun to repent and get myself in order. But that's part of their transformation that is shining through there. It's again, that argument that, well, that someone can be this good person. That's a good person. Who am I to say? We're really shortchanging from our perspective as Christians what we really want to share, to say, so in this case, as we're talking about transgenderism as an issue, we say, look, we want them to be in touch with reality, because that will put them on the path to knowing God, who is reality. And it's not just that we want to like control them or we want to be right about it. It's that in the end, we want everyone to encounter and know God and be transformed through that. And that is so much, it's so much bigger than, like you said, just, oh, I was right, and so I'm gonna go to heaven. Well, there's all of this life that we need to be concerned about too. One of the things down the line, if we decide to talk about other types of Christianity apart from the church, apart from Orthodoxy, we as Orthodox Christians are saying the kingdom of heaven starts right now. and we are able to encounter the knowable God. We are able to encounter the God who has revealed himself to us, and to go deeper and deeper and deeper into that in this life, and to be and to enjoy God in that way, and to be known by him. And that is so much higher than any sort of moral thing that someone could, if there was something that let's say there was some sin that I was struggling with, and I said, well, yeah, I wish I could still do this thing because it's pleasurable or something. It's like, actually, what we're talking about in terms of knowing God is so far beyond that. It's such, tremendous joy and peace and life, that anything, you'll set anything aside for it. And that's ultimately what the martyrs are pointing towards.
Right. And the moral thing is important as a kind of, it's almost like entry level, to know the right morals and to affirm the right morals and to do your best to keep the right morals. But then, you have to go beyond that. So that's why if somebody says to me, well, I'm a Christian and I smoke pot, or I'm a Christian and I'm homosexual, I'm a Christian and I'm this and that. So, well, no, you're not. I know, some people don't like that. But if you can't get the basic morals right, and you say that right is wrong and wrong is right, then no, you're not even on entry level yet. Mm-hmm. There's a church downtown here with a homosexual banner out, rainbow flag or whatever, and I tell people that's not a Christian church. How can you say that? Well, it's pretty self-evident. Sodom wasn't Christian either. You can't be, you can't not have the basic morals and say you're Christian. Mm-hmm. So that if you're not on the entry level, then you haven't even started yet. Mm-hmm. So when somebody first becomes Christian, if they haven't been one, that's kind of the first thing they learn. It's the first thing they want to learn. They don't want to offend God. They don't want to continue to sin. And that's the first thing that they work on, not knowingly, willingly going to do what they know to be wrong. Well, they have to know what wrong is. Mm-hmm. If you have somebody out there saying, no, I like to smoke pot and do this and do that, but I'm a Christian, it's pretty easy to say, no, you're not. Mm-hmm. And you can say, well, you don't know their heart. Mm-hmm. But you've got to do something to shake them out of that, because if they stay in that, maybe, for some odd reason, they haven't totally fallen away yet. But if they continue in that, they will fall away. Mm-hmm. So you got to kind of shake them up and say, look, you got to think twice about this. This is not what Christians do. Yeah. And I had to do that, because when I first realized that Jesus was God and the Christianity was true, I didn't know anything about it. And I was still doing the partying, still doing the drugs, giving up the sex because there was too much of a price to pay. But for that closeness that happens when you have sex with somebody, eventually I said, no, this isn't doing me any good. I was still doing the drugs and everything, still thinking I was Christian. And people would come up to me and said, no, that's not what Christians do. I needed to be told that. Mm-hmm. That's what spurred me to pick up the Bible that one day and look at it. And everywhere I turned, it said, stop, partying or whatever. But I wouldn't have, if somebody would said, oh yeah, you say you're Christian, then you're Christian. Sometimes you got to shake people up. One of the things I wanted to say was that go back to the culture. And the reason we can't seek to be part of the culture, the reason we can't seek to be accepted by the culture is because it's antichrist. And you can see this just by going step by step. There you are. Whatever we say, they say the opposite. Mm-hmm. And we went over this quickly before. I want to take a little bit more time this time. But we say, you can know who God is. So what do the seculars say? You can't.
You can't. Uh-huh.
You can know the truth, we say. They say, you can't know the truth. It's always going to be the opposite every single time. We say, you can know why you exist. They say, you can't. You can know what happens after death and how to prepare. They say, you can't. You always know what they believe by knowing what we believe, because they just took what we believed and did the opposite. So we say marriage is between one man and one woman. They say no. Mm-hmm. It can be between two men and two women. It can be, and by the way, remind me where I am. But by the way, this is when we lost the culture war. Now we're trying to scrape back up and fight it again, but we already lost it. Mm-hmm. Where we lost it was when homosexuals got the right to be married. because we were holding on. We were still trying to pretend we were some sort of Christian culture or something for a while. Of course, we hadn't been for a long time. There was still this kind of pretense that maybe we are. But when you get down to the basic building block of society, which is the family, and you change the definition of the family to something Christian to non-Christian, then the basic foundation of the culture is no longer Christian. So I think that's when we officially became a non-Christian culture. We were functionally that before. That's when we officially became non-Christian. And the people, right? I remember Senator Santorum, who was a senator here in Pennsylvania. So if you do, and other people said that too. Well, if you do that, then who's going to be marrying who? Anybody can marry anybody. You can marry 2 guys, 3 girls and 4 dogs or something. And people are like, no way, that's not. Why not? But there's no foundation. There's no absolute anymore. Whatever the society says is okay is going to be okay, because there is no God anymore. There is no absolute anymore. It's just what the elites want, the secular elites want. If they want to keep it just between, 2 men, 2 women, or 1 man and 1 woman, they can. If they want to say anything else, they can, because there's nothing making it absolute anymore. And that's the problem with the entire society. There's nothing keeping us from going to the worst of the worst or the best of the best. Nothing keeping us, but people don't usually go to the best of the best. Leave them to their own devices. We usually go to the worst of the worst. So that's when we officially lost it. But if we say, marriage is between 1 man and 1 woman, they say it's not. If we say, there's only 2 genders, they say there's not. If we say that women get pregnant with human beings, or abortion kills a human being, they say, no, women don't get pregnant with a human being. It doesn't kill a human being. If we say, whatever, if we say drunkenness isn't good, they say it is good. If we see pornography isn't good, they say it is good. We say the purpose of sex is for procreation and pleasure, and the closeness that happens makes no sense outside of that. They say, no, it's just for pleasure. Or just for closeness or whatever. So whatever we say, they say the opposite. And that's why now they're going with this whole minor attracted persons thing. We say, kids shouldn't be having sex. They say, well, maybe they should. They're sexual from the womb. And as we said before, they always do it this way. They always start out by changing how the words we use to describe the behavior or define the behavior. So with homosexuality, you used to say, oh, they're sodomites, they're sodomettes, they're whatever. You used to some term like that made sin look to be sin. We say no homosexual, which is more of a neutral term. Now it's more of a negative, but then it was neutral. And then it became gay, which is nice. So they're starting to do that again with sex with minors. They've taken it from pedophilia to minor attracted persons, which is neutral. Whether it'll keep going or not remains to be seen, but normally it does. Normally they're pretty successful in this. And I've heard them say kids are sexual from the womb, and you get these drag queens with kids and everything. It's going in that direction. And it's interesting because a number of not that long ago, if you were a 14-year-old girl and you went to some college party and you looked like you were 20, friend of ours had a niece, and he said, how old do you think my niece is here? I looked at her, she's 18, easy. No, she's 14. But if you went in there and you looked like an 18 or 20-year-old and you were at a college party and they assumed you were a college student and she had sex with somebody and her parents find out, that person could be charged with rape. And they said, because she's not old enough to consent. Well, now I'm sure they're going to take it down even lower than that. And they're not saying that anymore. And certainly with kids and transgender, they're not saying you're not old enough to consent. And the obvious thing here that people are saying is you got to be 21 to drink alcohol, you got to be 18 to vote, you got to be 16 to drive, you got to be 18 to be drafted, but you can start this gender surgery at what, almost 10 or whatever, 12 or whatever it is, but they'll do that. So we always have to remember that no matter what we like to think about America, and I'm a fan of America, I'm a fan of our Constitution, I'm a fan of all that, but we're not that anymore. We are an anti-Christian culture. And if we still have these ideas that maybe we are some sort of Christian culture, maybe we're not that bad, we are that bad. We are worse than that bad. We're taking kids and messing with kids. We are worse than that bad. And it's tough for us as Americans, it's tough for me as an American to come to that conclusion. But we no longer have even a semblance of a Christian society. We are anti-Christian at heart now. So we can't try to be accepted by that. We can try to be a light in it. Jesus said, be in the world, don't be of the world. All right. Be in it, not of it. Yeah. So, and we can try to do that. But if we're trying to be accepted by an anti-Christian culture, it won't be long before we're not Christian anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really important distinction you're making, because it's not just that we're saying our culture has sort of left Christianity, it's actively anti-Christian. Right. And so to be taken in or affirmed by that culture is well, you, like you said, you won't be Christian for very long.
No, and sometimes you don't see this. Some people say, oh, it's not that bad. One of the ways you can see it is when Roe versus Wade got overturned. What happened? All these crisis pregnancy centers, whatever they call them now, were being vandalized. Because that's now not everybody did that, but the news didn't really pick up on it much. They didn't say, oh, this is horrible, this is terrible. Because when it comes down to it, you see it when their sacred cows are being skewed by Christianity, or in this case, the court, but Christians were for it. And they can get pretty vicious. And not all of them understand how anti-Christian they are. But certainly the ones, on top must know. Used to know, at least. Maybe they're too deceived now. But it doesn't matter whether they know it or not. That's how they are, and that's how they act, and that's why we can't try to be a part of it. I mean, when I say a part of it, I don't mean we can't act within it and do things like I said. We can't try to be accepted by it.
Yeah. It's there are elements to our anti-Christian culture, I would say, that belong to one side of the political aisle or the other. So if you are full bore political, I think you're probably going to be captured by that culture, and in one way or another. And if that's your priority, I mean, that seems to be the, I don't know, I maybe that's for another time. Anyway, we could probably unpack sort of politics in the Christian world. A lot of it is just like you were saying, it's really more about conformity to our culture ultimately. And if it's an anti-Christian culture, then it's conformity to that.
Yeah, I would say that I would say we should be somewhat active in politics. I think if there's somebody running on a more of a Christian understanding of life than somebody else, we should definitely vote for them. Even though we lost the culture war, we can get it back. It's important that we do try to get it back, because as we've been saying, kids are coming from the womb in this anti-Christian culture, and their minds are being formed to be anti-Christian, and they're totally indoctrinated into it. And so when they get older, and that's the thing about putting all these obstacles in the way. You've got all these things that they're taught to believe in that are anti-Christian. Makes it harder and harder to leap over those, because even if you disagree with one or two, there's still 7, 8, 9, 10 of them to go. Now, of course, if you come to Christ, that'll all be taken care of totally. But that mindset, and people haven't been around a college campus for a while, don't understand the mindset of the students. They don't understand how, best I can say, is indoctrinated and brainwashed they are. They think in this way, and they can't conceive of thinking any other way. And they're nice, and they'll be nice to you, but they don't think you know what you're talking about, because nobody can know what they're talking about, because nobody can know who God is and what the truth is. So it happens at an earlier and earlier age. And now with these kids now being taught the whole transgender thing, so see, the college students now aren't necessarily fully on board with the transgender thing, because it happened kind of later in their life. But the kids coming up are going to be fully on board with it. So it's all about, and it's always about who's going to be God, who gets to say what sex we are, who gets to say what gender we are, who gets to say how we should have sex, who gets to say what women are pregnant with, who gets to make these decisions. The secular elites say we as man does. Man gets to be God. Man gets to do these things. We're saying no. Jesus gets to say these things. The Christian God, the Holy Trinity gets to say we don't get to say these things, and that's where we're at loggerheads with each other. Who's going to be God? It always goes back to the Garden of Eden. Are Adam and Eve going to be gods without God, or be gods with God? And they chose to be gods without God, and that's what we're choosing now, to be gods without God. And that's a decision everybody has to make, which way you're going to go.
That's right. Or there you have it.
There you go.
Is there anything more we want to say about, because we that was great. Thank you. We taking us through sort of a view of how the martyrs of old did things and how we might emulate them, and then also sort of how we now find ourselves in this anti-Christian culture. Is there anything more we want to say about the particular phenomenon of the transgender movement and so on?
And I'll probably think of something when I'm done. With me, it's always kind of a stream of consciousness. So I don't necessarily have all the stuff in my mind, but I can't think of anything offhand. If so, maybe next time we can bring it up. And next time, when we talk about homosexuality, you'll see the connection between homosexuality and transgender, and how we're doing the exact same thing with homosexuality as we're doing with transgender. I don't want to get into that right now, but when we do homosexuality, we can see that.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think with with transgenderism, you're talking about, like you said, younger and younger people. It's oftentimes very vulnerable people, and it's someone could be sort of finding themselves in that, and the real thing is that they're sort of not connecting with reality, as opposed to some sort of, let's say, hedonistic cultural thing as well. But it is kind of, as you said, all of one thing ultimately. And it's good to be able to talk about these things. We'll see what you two thinks of it. But it is good to be able to talk about these things. I think probably when we visit when we discuss, let's say, homosexuality or something like that, one of the questions always is, like, one of our friends, their daughter was graduating high school, and her like kind of final thesis paper for her graduation program was to try to make an argument about how should I understand the friend that I love, who is, as in, this is a nice person, I care for this person, they're homosexual and I'm a Christian, and how should I deal with that? It's a challenging thing. It's a challenging thing for a young person to kind of to not be swept away by that, but to think about it clearly.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing about them trying to say, I am a homosexual. And again, we'll get into this. I don't want to get into it now, but nobody is a homosexual. But when you say that, then if I reject his homosexuality, I'm rejecting him as a person.
Yeah.
His sexuality, just like everybody else, is one part of him. And just like other people, that you may disagree with some part of what they're doing, doesn't mean you have to reject the entire person.
Right.
So on campus, I think I've said this before, we talk with fornicators, drunkards, homosexuals, lesbians, communists, atheists, Muslims, Jews, whatever. And we don't say we have to reject the entire person because we disagree with one aspect of what they believe or what they do. If I had to reject everybody who was a drunkard at Penn State, I couldn't talk to hardly anybody, right? Because everybody seems to be. So you have to make that distinction. It all comes, and they do it on purpose, I think. Maybe they believe it now. But if you reject my way of doing such, you're rejecting me as a person because I am that. Well, if that's what you are, that's a pretty sad existence. Yeah. That's like if you said to a heterosexual person, if you reject his heterosexuality, you reject everything that he is. Well, what about everything else that we are? Or that's just, or fornicate, or anybody.
Yeah.
So everybody's much more than just how they choose to have sex. Now, how they choose to have sex is either right or wrong, but you don't have to reject the entire person because the way they choose to have sex is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Even with the transgender, I've met too many transgendered up there. I've met some. One was a young girl, probably 12, 13 years old. I thought it was kind of sad, but she used to come by fairly regularly and talk. And other than she didn't like when I called her by the wrong pronoun, we were able to talk and have friendly conversations. Because we recognized, and it's the same with the atheists and everybody else, and homosexuals and lesbians I've come to know, and fornicators and the drunkards I've come to know, and the Muslims I've come to, all these people, you can relate on other levels after a while. Yeah, that's what you discuss at first. But if they're willing to keep coming back, you realize, okay, we're not going to agree on this. We can put it aside for a while, and we always come back from it from time to time. We can relate on another level. Whatever it is, politics, sports, entertainment, whatever it is, we can relate on that level. And so we do. So we can still be friendly, and so on, without just because we disagree. Now, I think maybe they're going to hell because of that. So maybe it's more important to me than it is to them, or maybe to them, this is their identity. So it's very important to them. But it used to happen quite often. When people knew how to debate or wanted to debate or believe they had the truth, they keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And how many times we do it like this, they keep coming back, and eventually it'd be like, well, we've talked about this 1,000 times, and we talk about something else. And then once in a while we come back to it. But that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
It's not really that way anymore. That's the way it should be. When free speech was alive and well, that's the way it was.
Yeah, that's what I remember from the 90s. Lots of regular folks, the regulars out there at Willard, who would come out, and sometimes they talk about God and religious things, and sometimes they talk about some philosophical idea or some political idea, or like you said, sports or whatever. But that, yeah, you got to know them after a while. If it occurred to me that this idea where we say, no, this is who you are, that's really kind of like, that's a mark of that's bad parenting. If you have a child and a child does something wrong, you say, I'm upset because you did this thing. You wouldn't say, I'm upset because you are a terrible thing.
Right.
And and so to identify, that's part of the trick, right? It's a rhetorical manipulative device, is to say, no, this is who I am, and completely. And especially, I guess that's what really becomes difficult with the transgender thing, because they literally say, I identify as this, as in identity, so this is my identity. And so then because they define it in those terms, then you can't to reject that identification is to, even if it's runs counter to reality, as you said, it is then seen as a rejection of that person. But
right, it's seen as a rejection to them as a person, and you don't want to do that. So you make compromises.
Yeah.
So the more you get used to making, and when I say this, I understand, that there's discernment and everything. The more we make compromises, the more easier it is to make compromises. Yeah. And we start out little ones, and they become bigger and bigger and bigger. And I understand you don't have to fight every battle. I understand there's discernment as to when to say things and when not to say things. But that's different than making compromises. I have a wall out here of icons in my no compromise wall, and all these different people who I respect as standing up and not compromising. No matter, some of them are martyrs, some of them did other things, and we've even made a couple of our own no compromise things, so that I can always remember, look, we have to stand, because it's just, even though I'm out there all the time, it's still a temptation to me too. It's always nicer to be liked. Sure. I always have to say, am I saying this to be liked? Am I making a compromise? Or am I saying that, or am I saying, is this the truth that I'm saying? We always have to say the truth, or not say anything, but don't compromise, because you'll keep compromising. And before you know it, you'll be off the rails, either no good to anybody, you'll be lukewarm, or you'll just be non-Christian after a while. I'm not sure there's a difference between those two things, but
yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess one of the thoughts there too, in terms of that sort of compromise, one of the Psalms, I think our numbering is 118, says over and over again, "Blessed art thou, God, O Lord, teach me thy statutes." Over and over. And it's not just that God wants us to follow the rules. It's that this is the way that facilitates relationship. That's the tragedy of sin, whether it's if you're in the church or out of the church or whatever, is that sin that's why we go to confession, is that sin interrupts the relationship. It breaks the communion, and that's the real tragedy. It's not that, X, Y, or Z is this, the end all be all of unforgivable sins. It's that we knew better. We did it anyway. We walked away. We broke communion. And, so if the person, the person is, let's say, compromising with, if I'm to compromise and with our culture and walk down that road, little by little, that relationship's going to be interrupted. And so all of a sudden I won't have, the grace of God is needed, to kind of keep moving in the Christian life. And certainly to stay strong, it is,
Yeah, and even if it's not a sin, like we rebelliously did something wrong, even those inner passions, those inner desires that we're attracted to, greed, envy, anger, lust, whatever, if they well up and there's an attraction there, that's still a problem. Not a problem that necessarily God is going to, send you to hell or anything, but a problem in that it impedes the relationship. Anything within us that isn't the way it's supposed to be impedes the relationship. And as those things get put back in place the way they are supposed to be, the relationship is opened up again. It's all about the relationship. It's not this legal status. You don't do it for fear of going to hell, although having that fear isn't a bad thing, but you do it for the relationship because you want the relationship to be better.
Absolutely. Very good.
So,
yeah.
Before
to
end, yeah.
To
Before we end, I just wanted to remind people that next week in the Orthodox Church is Holy Week. And Holy Week, we have lots of services, at least 2 a day. Holy Friday, 3 a day. So we won't be doing one of these next week. So we'll bring it up again. I guess we'll do it the week after, the week of the 17th, right?
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, it was fun again.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you,
Hope
Gary.
everybody enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yep. I'll talk to you soon, and have a wonderful Holy Week.
Yes, you too.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you.